Hello everyone, this is Crota giving you a shoutcast in the second game between Tarson and WhiteRa here in the Delta Quadrant. Tarson spawning as the yellow Terran player, meanwhile WhiteRa spawning as the purple Protoss. So yeah, Tarson and WhiteRa decided to change up their colors a little bit, making it fairly difficult for me to try to constantly update this little replay timer. Anyways, Duckload Raw or WhiteRa versus Tarson, and I like the spawning locations here for Tarson. Tarson, a little bit of an advantage at this stage just because the low ground expansion is closer to his base than for a WhiteRa. So WhiteRa getting a little bit unlucky in this matchup. Will it be able to play out? Will it give him that much of an advantage? Will he be able to will it give Tarson that much of an advantage? Will he be able to pull off the win? So Tarson continuing to mine over here. We do have one supply depot being built on the back door, and I like the positioning on the supply depot. And a lot of players may be wondering why you would build a supply depot on this back door location, and it's because a lot of Protoss players recently I've seen use pylons in this location in order to warp in units onto this low ground. They can then mass up a very large unit and a large army and then try to walk up into this location. If I was Tarson, however, I would have moved this supply depot down into this location. That location would give a little bit more sight into the critical areas where the pylon would be able to warp in units. Now we see one probe making its way out, and in order to do some scouting, we have the refinery now in play, refinery now placed down in addition to that barracks. So it looks like Tarson going for that standard that standard 12 racks. And yes, going for that standard 12 racks there. So now, probe coming off the mineral line, trying to fight back against this SCV. SCV will take some points of damage and now pull away. And Tarson taking 15 points of damage on that SCV as it continues to move around the map. WhiteRa will be getting a gateway up in just a moment, and followed by a cybernetics core as WhiteRa opened up with that standard assimilator there. So waiting for that cybernetics core. Oh, looked like he was trying to place on a assimilator for just a second, and now going for that cybernetics core. We now finally have a probe walking around on the inside of this base, trying to get some damage across all of these units here. A Marine now coming out. Marine fighting against that one probe, and that probe taking a lot of damage. Not exactly sure what that probe will be able to do as that Marine is able to just use that range attack and take a very, very sharper turn inside track in order to deal damage. Marine now moving down into this location and perhaps making sure that there are no probes in this base. Now trying to do some scouting out, and Tarson opening up with the double supply depot in this back door. That's a really curious positioning. Perhaps he's got to know that, yeah, this is his front door, so I don't know why he would build two here unless he thought that there was going to be a pylon placed back there. So Tarson now getting a factory into play and should be able to perhaps go for a starport. He has not done any scouting yet, so Tarson still playing in the dark. And that is a bit of a concern for me, as the Terran player really needs to figure out what the strategy of the Protoss player is and then build the proper counter units. Back over here, we now see one Stalker making its way out, most likely, and a second Stalker, and then followed by a Sentry being able to place a force field on this front door ramp. And then the Protoss player can sit in his base and make it very, very difficult for the Terran player to figure out what exactly is happening. Now, four Marines trying to fight back against that one Stalker. However, somehow that Stalker was able to see up that ramp or maybe it was actually high enough to be able to gain sight as those units once again pull back here. So we do have one probe now getting a Twilight Council. So WhiteRa may be able to just simply move into this location, blink in, and then walk up this ramp. However, Tarson completely sealing this back door. So that will be very, very interesting indeed, as if WhiteRa does not do the timing well, he may get stuck into this location and reveal himself a little bit earlier. And now we see Tarson going in for an early tech lab. Early tech lab normally means that we will be getting some, I was going to say Banshees, but instead he's going for Ravens. So Ravens with Marines, and Marines with that point defense drone may be able to deal enough damage against those Stalkers. Stalkers only deal 10 damage per attack, so essentially two Marines have a much higher DPS against Stalkers. Stalkers have more hit points, obviously, and now it looks like it's going to be a 3-gate push with a Twilight Council, and now getting Stalker blink. Stalkers once again trying to walk up that ramp. However, there is a bunker in position. Those Stalkers and just constantly putting pressure on that front door as these Stalkers waiting in this position here. Stalker blink, and now I believe being chrono boosted. Solo Stalkers may be able to put a lot of pressure, and now we are getting that third gateway. Most likely will upgrade to a warp gate in just a second as these Stalkers sit over here. So these Stalkers most likely will try to blink into this direction and then simply walk up this ramp. We also have a supply depot down here by Tarson. So Tarson, realizing that this is a map that kind of favors Protoss in this particular matchup, and now we are getting some siege tanks as well. So and Tarson really unable to use this advantage, that the backdoor location here is closer to him, as WhiteRa has not yet placed a Nexus down in this position. Most likely Nexus should be placed down here in just a moment. However, it looks like WhiteRa just trying to confine himself to one base play with mass Stalkers. So mass Stalkers now coming out with so many Marines and no Marauders. This is going to be a very, very difficult fight, as the Stalkers now once again trying to push on this front door. We do have this Raven in the air. SCV is now coming off the mineral line in order to try to repair, and these Stalkers with Stalker Blink now taking down this one supply depot over here. So as that supply depot is now taken down, Siege Tank sitting up on the high ground. No Siege Tank just quite yet, and Stalker's blinking away, able to pull back again. Where will this Siege Tank try to sit itself? And now this is just going to be a very, very dangerous situation for a Terran player. Terran player being forced to walk and guard two front doors, and now Stalker's coming in over here. SCVs are on auto repair and doing a good job and blinking, and now using a point defense drone. So Tarson just trying to hang on for dear life here. A Nexus needs to be placed down by WhiteRa, otherwise he will not be able to capitalize on this early aggression by these Stalkers. The Stalkers may try to blink into this direction here, and now if it tries to blink, yeah, gonna go ahead and blink and test the waters. Siege Tanks, no Siege Tech just quite yet, no point defense drone either, so now dealing some damage across some of those Stalkers. The Siege Tanks do have a fairly fast attack speed, almost 1 per second, and dealing 25 damage per attack there. So units once again trying to pull back around, trying to figure out what exactly they can do, as these units are still being massed up and macroed up indeed. We now have a orbital command already upgraded. Perhaps more mules will be called down. However, he needs to try to establish this expansion here. If he does not establish this expansion, he does not quite sure what the Terran player is going to do. We do have a Banshee now coming in from Tarson, so that Banshee was able to get 2 kills. Now perhaps going to be able to get up to 3 kills as more probes trying to come in, getting up to 4 kills. Now Stalkers quickly blinking underneath and taking that down. So that one Banshee able to only get, I believe, 4 to 5 kills before those blinking Stalkers able to return home, deal damage. We also have High Templar currently in play. No Psystorm yet being researched, as we are now getting the Zealot charge. We have an expansion now being set up by Tarson. So Tarson getting a lot of Marines, some Siege Tanks. These Marines do have the Stim Pack research, no Combat Shell just quite yet. And without any Hellions, the number of Zealots may become a problem for Tarson. Tarson will be forced to deal with a lot of Zealots within that melee range. Siege Tanks, you gotta remember, only deal 35 damage towards Zealots, even their shields. And now in come the Stalkers. Stalkers taking a quick blast there and now being forced to pull back. A lot of damage dealt. Siege Tanks doing a great job. Perhaps a point defense drone could be placed in the air right here to offer up a little bit of sight as well. That Raven down to 105 energy. I do not believe there are any additional Ravens, as this one point defense drone will get taken down in just a moment. What is the point defense drone last 3 game minutes? So yeah, they really need to get taken down. Marines once again on the move. We now finally get the robotics facility, and now will these High Templars be able to do anything? I believe I saw a couple High Templars earlier. No point defense drones. Stim now being used. And where is that Raven? And the Raven looked like it was shot or taken down earlier. More Stalkers coming in, and now in comes a High Templar. High Templar does not have enough energy for any Psystorm, and now those Marauders now simply coming into this position here. And now Tarson doing a great job with these Marines and Marauders. Siege Tanks now sieging up onto that high ground, blasting away at these Stalkers. Stalkers now trying to blink within that 0 range here. However, the Stalkers have been cleaned up, and WhiteRa now saying GG. So it looks like this was a best of 3 series between WhiteRa and Tarson. WhiteRa took game 1, Tarson taking game 2, able to force a game 3. The expansion is already it was down by Tarson, so Tarson had a significant economic advantage. You can see that he's mining twice the amount of minerals there. And I believe there was a little bit of Banshee harassment. I wanted to go back to that Banshee harassment, make sure I didn't miss too much of that Banshee harassment if I'm able to. Come on. make sure I wasn't able to miss, or I wasn't missing too much of that Banshee harassment. Yeah, only one Banshee came during that engagement there as the Stalkers were trying to test the front door. So really a great game between WhiteRa and Tarson on Delta Quadrant. WhiteRa able to use a little bit of a Banshee harassment, able to deal a lot of damage across these probes, didn't really use that many Marauders, and transitioned away from Marauders and decided to use Siege Tanks. Siege Tanks attack significantly faster than Marauders who do not have stim, and also deal more damage to armored units and unarmored units as well. So that was the reason why Tarson was able to just deal that much damage across a lot of those Stalkers and those Zealots. Also, that one Banshee was able to clean up a lot of those Zealots as well. Banshee, a very strong counter against those Zealots. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this 1v1 replay between Tarson and WhiteRa here on Delta Quadrant. Stay tuned for Game 3.